everybody. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Michael Bryant. Good to have you here for the afternoon. Today we're going to be back deep in Iowa with the Cheyenne Harris case as the mother of the 4-month-old who died allegedly at the neglect of the parents continues on trial there. I'll be joined too by Marni Snyder. She'll be here in just a couple of moments. But before we get back into some of the details of this case, let's back up a bit and visit with the neighbor of the family. She actually popped in and talked to investigators. She also was on the stand. This is Jennifer Shriver.
First of all, was Sterling a happy baby?
Yeah, he seemed very happy.
And why did you say that?
Oh yeah, he was smile. He didn't fuss a lot. He just seemed content.
And what observations did you make of the size of Sterling when you babysat him in the middle of July 2017?
When she handed him to me before they left, he seemed really tiny.
What do you mean?
He seemed lightweight. When she handed him to me, I kind of did one of these gestures with my arms, and he just seemed lightweight.
Now, do I understand from your testimony that you had not seen or met Sterling from the time he was born until you met him for the first time in the middle of July? Is that correct?
Correct.
Did she give you instructions as to how to properly care for Sterling and Nala?
She did. She had a notebook. She was very organized.
What do you mean?
She had a notebook where she left little notes on when Nala had Tylenol because she wasn't feeling well. There was instructions. They had different diaper wipes for sensitive skin, different diapers. She was, step by step, pretty organized.
And so was she able to explain to you which wipes you need to use for Nala and which separate wipes you need to use with Sterling?
Yes, she did.
Did she provide clothing for Nala?
Yes.
Was it appropriate clothing?
Yes.
And did she describe to you how you were to use the clothing?
Yes.
And the same for Sterling. Did she provide clothing for you to use for Sterling?
So that is the neighbor and the babysitter, Jennifer Shriver. Babysitters are like hairdressers. They know things. They hear everything. They see everything. And in this case, Jennifer Shriver is talking about her experiences with Cheyenne Harris as a mom. And remember, there are 2 kids involved here, not just the victim, 4-month-old Sterling, but 2-year-old Nala, who, from all appearances, was, quote, normal, seemed to be relatively healthy and happy. And so this babysitter has a chance to kind of talk about that child and her encountering with that child as she's the babysitter. Now, Marni Snyder, let me ask you this. Prosecution's putting this witness on. Certainly they're not suggesting the defendant is Mother of the Year. So what's the purpose of really kind of showing her doing her job with Nala?
It's very strange, but I think that they're going to say that that's the proof that she could be a good parent, that she wasn't so intoxicated that she couldn't take care of her other child, and therefore neglected Sterling either on purpose, with intent. There's a bunch of different degrees that they can argue here in this kind of case, but that means that she caused his death and is guilty.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it makes it look like there's some consciousness to not take care of Sterling, that here she is taking care of Nala. Everything seems to be fine, even though her breakfast at noon was cookies, as I recall. Not, maybe not the best diet, but certainly taking care of the kid. So why not take care of Sterling? There must be some intent not to take care of Sterling. Jennifer Shriver, this babysitter, didn't have all positive experiences when dealing with the kids there in the Harris household. Let's listen to what she has to say about something that didn't go quite so well.
So did you see Cheyenne Harris arrive home?
I did.
And tell me what you mean, how you saw her.
I seen her walking up the sidewalk. I could hear their car pull up. They didn't have the quietest car, so I heard them pull up and seen her walking up into their apartment.
And what time of day was that?
I'm not 100% sure.
Did you watch Sterling overnight?
Yes.
Would it have been the next day?
Yes.
After Miss Cheyenne arrived home and you saw her walking into the apartment complex, did she come directly to pick up the children?
No.
What happened?
She had texted and said that she needed a minute, if she could have a few minutes to just get herself together before coming to get the kids.
Did you agree?
I did.
What happened next?
Nala ran out of milk and she was on her last diaper, and I through her text telling her that it was time that she needed to come get the kids.
And did she come get the kids?
No.
Well, how long was it after she arrived at the apartment complex and she said she needed a little time? Did you reach out to her and say that she needed to come get the kids?
I don't know how much time had passed. I just knew that her baby needed milk and needed diapers, and they were starting to get fussy.
And you told her that and she didn't come right away?
No.
What happened?
Me and my boyfriend, I ended up grabbing the kids' stuff, and we brought them over to her.
Why did you do that?
Because Nala was fussy. She needed a diaper change. She needed milk, things like that.
What happened when you went to the defendant's apartment?
Ms. Harris came to the door and seen that I had brought the kids over to her, and she kind of and rolled her eyes like she wasn't ready to have the kids back up.
And did you give her the kids?
Yes.
Was that the last time that you saw Sterling alive?
Yes.
That is Jennifer Shriver, the babysitter, talking about a time in which it looked like even Nala, the 2-year-old, under the care of Cheyenne Harris, was really not being cared for that carefully. We've heard all kinds of stories about the activities taking place in the Harris household while Nala was there, and while in some cases visitors didn't even know that Sterling, the 4-month-old, was another baby in the household in another room. But we're hearing things like, well, yeah, we smoked meth, but we did it in the bedroom, and Nala was out in the other room kind of taking care of herself, fending for herself, as if to say, Marni, Joe Snyder, hey, we're not that bad at parenting. We only smoked meth in the bedroom. We didn't do it where the kid was around. So it's such a weird discussion on conduct. I don't know how the whole thing plays out. Is there anything good that comes out of this?
I mean, look, being a bad parent, being a parent who does drugs, which is very dangerous, is not the same thing as having an intention for your child to die or an intention to kill them. And so really, the prosecution needs to put this bad parenting together towards death, because it's something that is hard for anyone to imagine. The jury, it's actually a hard leap for juries to take, that a parent would want to kill a child. And so the prosecution really has to do a great job of showing that these things meant death. And you know what? Rolling your eyes when you're not ready for the babysitter to be done is not something that I've seen good parents do, and it's not something that translates to murder. So I think that it makes it look like the prosecution's doing a good job making her look bad, but bad and a murder are two different things.
That is a good point, and we will find out. They're back in court now in Iowa. Let's go there. This is Dr. Timothy Huntington. He's an entomologist. He's going to talk about what was found in Sterling's room. So, Defendant Cheyenne Harris probably preparing to hear even worse from Dr. Timothy Huntington, who's talking about the very specific scientific details of the fly lifespan, from the larva to the pupa to the fly, better known as the scuttle fly in this case. Marni, Joe Snyder, I could swear that just before he was introduced, I heard you say, "This is so cool." Was that? Did I hear that? Is that? Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I love scientific testimony. I think it's really helpful, one, putting pieces together for a jury, but it's really always very interesting to listen to, and the jury is still the one that gets to decide how much weight to give this evidence and what conclusions to draw from what he says. So I think it's really interesting, and I had a roommate in college who grew hissing cockroaches in our dorm rooms. That also takes me back to another entomology major that I had to live with.
Wow, sounds like a dream roommate there. Hey, I've got a great book idea for you. I don't know that we have a Law&Crime book club just yet, but there is a book by a doctor named Lee Goff. He was the pioneer of this kind of forensic entomology. In fact, he and his stories and character were used to base Gus Grissom's character from the CSI show in Las Vegas on. So I had the opportunity to work with the two of them on a project relating to a museum of entomology. So the book is called Fly for the Prosecution. So if you get a chance, Marni, pick that up, probably out there on some book rack somewhere. Fascinating book about this science that right now in the courtroom we're hearing from Dr. Timothy Hutton explain as it relates to the death of Cheyenne Harris's son, Sterling, that 4-month-old. We're going to take a break. We're going to come right back to Law&Crime. So we're in the midst of an honors program here in forensic entomology. Dr. Timothy Huntington talking in great detail about what he learns from the various stages of the fly's life cycle and how that equates to the death of little baby Sterling. You know, Marni Jo, in the abstract, as you know, as a science geek, you know, I'll raise my hand. I know you're raising yours. It's fascinating stuff. In the practical, when we apply it to this case, it is downright revolting. The important part of his testimony, it seems to me, is creating that timeline. We've heard about it from opening statements, and it's been hinted about by others, but now we're hearing the doctor saying, look, these things don't happen to flies from the egg to the larva to the pupa to the fly stage without this passage of time. Powerful stuff, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, the defense of intoxication, people think of a bender, right? A parent who's not doing so great, who goes out on a Saturday night and doesn't come home till late and neglects their child in the morning while they're hungover. He's talking about 8 to 12 days. And again, there's a big difference between a not so great parent and a murderer. But when you're talking about 8 to 12 days of ignoring a child with feces in their diaper and barely moving them, right? He said that the baby would have had to been barely stationary. I mean, that's where we really get into malicious intent and just kind of hoping that this child would have died.
Yeah, and that struck a chord with me as well, because everybody's shooed away flies. It doesn't take much to get a fly, no matter what size, the scuttle fly, a little teeny fly, or bigger. They aren't anxious to hang around. But when there's zero movement and they have the opportunity to set up camp, lay eggs, and grow a family, they do it. But it takes stillness. How does a baby get that still? Already dead, effectively moribund, I think, as the doctor put it. So still, so motionless that the flies can do just that. We're going to get back to more from the doctor in that courtroom when we come back to Law and Crime. Stay with us for more of the Iowa versus Cheyenne Harris case. We'll be right back. In that Iowa courtroom, we see the defendant, Cheyenne Harris. She cannot look at these images. We are not showing them to you because, well, you can't unsee them. You really don't need to see them. Marni Jo Snyder is with me, criminal defense attorney. The jury's got to see these photos, Marni Jo. You know, what kind of impact does this have on a jury?
I think it has a huge impact on the jury. In fact, in cases where I'm not debating the cause of death or something like that, I would have asked the judge to keep these photos out because I would be saying that they were more prejudicial than probative, meaning they would inflame the passions of the jury so much that they couldn't help but being biased against my client. But in this case, the prosecution can absolutely get them in and say that they're relevant because of this forensic science entomology testimony. So
Exactly.
In order for him to describe doing a good job and why he's making certain conclusions that he is, they have to be able to show those pictures and show the maggots in development. And I'm sure it's really hard for the jury to watch as well.
And in this case, where you might be able to limit the number of images, in this case, because
Right.
they go to his expertise and his opinion, there's going to be a lot more latitude as to how many of those images come in. Quite often you can say, as somebody trying to offer evidence, hey, we need to get this and this in, and the judge says, no, forget it. Well, my expert needed to rely upon. Oh, well, in that case, yes, it can come in. So you're right. The jury's been forced to necessarily look at these gruesome images of young Sterling with maggots and other fly elements all about him. Thank you, Marni Jo. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We'll keep you posted on what's going on in that Iowa courtroom as they're wrapping up for the week. So stay with us for that. We'll also update you on the California case against Charles Merritt and let you know what's happening there as we go into next week. So, Michael Bryant here. Good to have you along. Stay right where you are for more of the Law and Crime Network. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We've been live in that Iowa courtroom all afternoon for Iowa versus Cheyenne Harris, and the timing perfect, as we predicted. That was the last witness. You just heard the tail end of Dr. Timothy Huntington, the forensic entomologist, talking about the impact and the evidentiary value of the flies and the larvae and those things found with young Sterling at the time he was discovered dead. Then that was it. The state rested. And so they are done, ending with some very powerful testimony. We'll see what the defense has in store next week. They do have an affirmative defense, this intoxication postpartum defense. So they're going to have to put somebody on for that case. But Marni Jo Snyder is still with me, criminal defense attorney. How do you feel about, the prosecution ending with a lot of powerful, gut-wrenching stuff, and then see you later, jury, go stew on that for about 2 days before the defense gets started?
Right. Well, in some cases, I think it's great to kind of start fresh with the defense, having them think now they're going to hear their other side of the case, really taking those sides one after the other. Sometimes they look at it more fairly. But here, they just saw these pictures at the end of the day on Friday. They're not supposed to go talk to people about the case and about the facts of the case, because the only people that can judge this case are the jurors that hear the evidence that the judge says it's okay to hear. But they're going to take those images home with them. They might talk about how they saw something disturbing in court, how they're sad, how they need to kind of recuperate, and that might stick with them for the weekend, and I think that's really hard to overcome. The weekend also, though, gives that defense attorney the chance to wipe the face off that she's had all day, looking at her client like she's horrible, so maybe she'll come back refreshed.
Let me ask you an aside. It's a somewhat related question having to do with the jury and wandering off to think this over for the weekend. This was a change of venue case, much closer to Des Moines by about 200 miles than the location where the crimes allegedly took place. Also a different spot from where the boyfriend, Zachary Cohen, was tried. He was tried about 200 miles south of that location. So now we're at a little closer to, I don't know, metropolitan Iowa, if that's not a contradiction in terms. So what do you think, if any, impact it might have on this case by getting a jury that is maybe a little more sophisticated, less rural?
Yeah. Well, I have to be honest, you're making me go all the way back to Monday, and I can't remember. Sometimes when there's a change in venue, they do actually pick the jury of peers near where things were. I assume this change in venue is, in fact, just what you said, is that they can't find a fair jury pool near her hometown or near the town where this happened. So this might be metropolitan. I think I think it could play well for the defense actually in this case. And I know that there are people that would disagree with me. But I think they might be sympathetic to social issues that might have affected her. They might realize that her life is not the same as theirs if they can kind of paint a picture of where she lives and what she has access to in regards to medical care, what she herself has access to in regards to rehabilitation for drug use. Yeah, so it might actually be compelling to that audience.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think they're more likely to embrace these kinds of defenses. I don't know if you need to have 12 people that are new mothers with a drug habit. That might be the best jury for you. You're not going to find that, but you might find some folks that are a little more receptive. We're going to take a break from the intense expert-type testimony and listen to a recipient witness, somebody that was not a first responder, not an expert, just the regular folks who have encountered the players in this case to give us a sense of what the people were like. What was Cheyenne Harris like? What was that home like? So let's go back into the courtroom now and catch up on some testimony you may have missed the first time. And this is the babysitter for the Harris youngster.
How did you learn that Sterling had died?
I was freshly out of the hospital, just gotten home. I went outside for a cigarette, and I noticed that Mr. Cohen was outside. And I said hi, but he didn't say anything back to me. So I walked over to him, and I said, "Is everything okay?" And that's when he stated to me that he was gone. And I said, "Who's gone?" He said, "My boy." I said, "What do you mean gone?" "He's just gone," he said.
And what did you say next?
I don't remember exactly what I said next, but I said, "You mean he's dead? He's gone?" I don't know.
What was Mr. Cohen doing?
He was outside smoking a cigarette.
Did that upset you?
A little bit. I told him, I said, if your baby's gone, I said, "Have you called anybody? Have you called 911 or anything?" He's like, "We don't know what to do." I was like, "Well, you need to put your cigarette down and you should probably go inside and call 911.
Did you see Miss Harris?
I didn't see Miss Harris for some time had passed there.
That is Jennifer Shriver, the babysitter for Cheyenne Harris and for Zach Cohen. She knows them pretty well, so now she's encountering him at a brutal and bizarre moment in anybody's life, and he's outside just having a butt and hasn't called the authorities, hasn't done anything. He just knows that his son is dead. Let's listen to more from the babysitter. She had an interaction with the defendant, Cheyenne Harris, that I think you're going to be interested in.
Chance to interact with Cheyenne.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that interaction?
They were talking about funeral arrangements and some stuff like that. And at some point, she had looked at me and Zach and said, "It seems like everybody's pointing their finger at me." And I agreed with her. That's exactly what it seemed like to me. Like everybody was pointing their finger at her.
And what did she say in response to your statement?
At that time, she kind of winged her arm out over to Zach and said, "I told you we should have taken Nala, Leo, and ran."
Should have taken Nala, Leo, and ran?
Yeah.
And Leo would be the dog, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you respond to that at all?
I didn't know how to respond.
Well, I don't know. Consciousness of guilt. We should have just taken the dog and Nala and just headed out once we found out that our 4-month-old boy was dead. Boy, Marni Joe, sounds like early on that the defendant was feeling pretty bad about what happened and pretty guilty. Is that false guilt just because, anytime this might happen to a family, you're going to blame yourself? Or is this real guilt, like, what did I do and I'm going to get caught?
Right. I mean, I can't tell, but I will say when that witness started that sentence, I thought that she was going to say that the defendant said, "I told you we should have taken him to the hospital." And the fact that that sentence ended with "we should have ran," I think normally points the jury towards consciousness of guilt. And there could be, I assume that jurisdiction, like mine does, has a jury instruction where the judge will say, if you find that this person ran or like packed up to run, showed some inclination towards flight, you may consider that in determining their own consciousness of guilt. So I can't imagine that this is good testimony at all for the defense.
Of course. Let's get a little more philosophical about the details of the charges and what the defense really must be trying to do here. I don't think either attorney, and they seem to be zealously representing their client, Nicole Watt, Aaron Hawbaker, they don't seem to have thrown in the towel. But I have to believe deep down they're thinking our goal is to get this woman out of prison at some point before she dies. The mandatory sentence is life without parole. If she is convicted of some lesser charge, a manslaughter charge, she could be in for 20 years, 25 years. She's only 21. So she gets out in her mid-40s. If it's a geezer like me, hey, at 20, 30 years, that might as well be a life sentence. But if you're a youngster like her, that's a huge victory to be able to get her out of prison at some point. So if the goal is really just to negate that specific intent to be a murderer, how do you think it went, at least before the defense puts their case on?
I mean, it's hard. That timeline I thought was the killer, right? Because I think that some people could visualize, maybe not understand or have any sympathy for someone who leaves their child unattended for drugs for, a weekend, a night. I don't think that that's sympathetic, but I think 8 to 12 days of not coming out of the haze to check on your child is a serious problem, because some of those days could be excused by her being in an intoxicated state. Some of those days could be excused in lapses of intoxication by thinking that her husband might have been doing a good job. But 8 to 12 days of not checking or looking on your child and leaving them in a dirty diaper is just something that shows an extreme indifference towards the value of human life, and could even show that they did not care, depravity. And so I think it's a really hard battle for them. And I will say, I thought the defense attorneys, in the way that they spoke, the questions that they asked, were doing a good job. I think that defense attorney just got plagued by a really emotional situation. And I think that if she was going to show that these were disturbing pictures, and that's okay for the jury to think that, she still needed to show some sympathy for her client having to see them too, and turn her body the other way. And I hope that she did feel that and just kind of mess this moment up a little bit, and that they recover from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important what's going on at the witness stand. It's also important for the jurors to see what's going on in the courtroom, and they see the defendant with her head in her hand, which I think would be a natural response from anybody that would be faced with the photos that jury had to look at. So her whole team needs to really kind of be on the same page as to how they're going to handle that scenario. As part of the background of the case, we heard from a witness from Child Protective Services. So let's catch you up on that. As I mentioned before, the state has rested in Iowa versus Cheyenne Harris. The defense will take over. I think the judge said they're going to start at 9 o'clock their time on Monday morning. Maybe you have some housekeeping to take care of before actual testimony. But for now, let's go back and listen to something you may have missed. This is Sheila Schroeder. She is from Child Protective Services.
How long approximately did you meet with Ms. Harris?
I don't recall a specific time. Generally, when I meet with parents for the types of questions I was asking, it's about an hour.
Now, you had testified a moment ago that your purpose in interviewing Ms. Harris was to obtain information, right?
Yes.
Now, your report says that the parents provided information on their terms, doesn't it?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
When I was asking questions and gathering information, there were times when I was asked to refer to law enforcement for those questions because they had already been answered.
What do you mean?
Her partner just talked about the things that I was asking had already been answered by law enforcement, and it didn't seem that they would wanted to talk about those things a second time with me.
Did you ask Ms. Harris, the defendant in this case, to explain why she believed Sterling had died on August 30th, 2017?
Yes, I talked with her about that.
And what did she tell you?
Her partner had indicated that the child had died from SIDS, and she agreed with that statement.
What is SIDS?
Sudden infant death syndrome.
That is a Child Protective Services worker talking with Zachary Cohen and Ms. Harris just after, within a day or so of the death of Sterling. She's trying to get a read on them, to get a sense of whether or not they're just the worst parents in the world. Are they murderers? I mean, there's a huge difference, as Marni Jo has pointed out. Let's listen to more of her testimony on this interview.
What was Mr. Cohen's demeanor?
He shared the same as Cheyenne. They were reluctant initially to commit to meeting with me that day.
Did he laugh during your interview with him?
During the interview, he did laugh.
Okay. And did you characterize him as being dismissive?
I did.
Okay. In contrast, Ms. Harris was tearful throughout the interview?
Yes, she was.
And during that interview, did she often apologize for Mr. Cohen's behavior?
She provided an explanation as to why he was laughing.
You testified that you didn't have a concern that she was under the influence at the time that you were talking to her, but based on your interview, did you have a concern about her past methamphetamine use?
Yes.
And how that might affect her ability to parent?
Yes.
And in fact, that is sadly a common occurrence that DHS runs across, fair?
Yes.
And it sounds like at times in this conversation, Mr. Cohen would offer an explanation and Ms. Harris would agree with it. For example, the idea of it maybe being SIDS, correct?
I agree with the SIDS statement, yes.
So he puts it out there that it might be SIDS and she simply agreed with it, fair?
She did, yes.
The idea that she was not able to provide specific times of feedings and those sorts of things, that would be consistent with methamphetamine use?
It could be, yes.
And that, as I understand, is part of the problem with methamphetamine as you testified earlier, is it affects their ability to parent. Fair?
Yes.
And they may neglect their child's needs.
So that is the Child Protective Services worker, Sheila Schroeder. And what an odd conversation taking place there. A number of things that were a little bit off. Zach Cohen is there and somewhat giggling, laughing during the course of the discussion, while Cheyenne Harris, his girlfriend, the mother of Sterling, is crying for the most part, much more expected, I suppose. But it leads you to wonder, what's going through their respective minds. I get the feeling, Marni Jo, and maybe I'm going a little too far here, but I get a sense there was some relief that we now don't have to deal with this little baby. Yeah, I mean, that's my broad brush picture of the whole illusion that I'm getting of this family. We're taking care of Nala. We did okay with one. She's still alive. She cheated death. And now we don't have to worry about this little boy anymore.
Well, I think that's why they wanted to show Zachary laughing during that meeting, is because he certainly seems to feel that way from the laughing. And like, look, I know how to talk about the other way, and I know that people deal with grief differently, but it never rings well with the jury when during a confession or interview, someone is laughing after the death of a child. It's good for the defense, though, because her crying, it makes her look guilty of picking Zachary, in the agreeing with him, being guilty of picking Zachary over Sterling. But it does look like she has some very serious feelings of loss towards her child and disappointment in herself for her drug use. So I think overall that was a good process by the defense to bring those out.
The key to this case is the defense of intoxication combined with this postpartum problem. So, Marni Jo, when we come back, we're going to go back into the courtroom. We're going to hear testimony that lays a little bit of foundation for that defense, which we expect to start next week. So, come back and join us for more on the Law&Crime Network. We'll be right back. To the Law&Crime Network, everyone. I'm Michael Bryant with you for the balance of the hour here. Marni Jo Snyder is with me. We're tearing apart the now state-rested Iowa versus Cheyenne Harris case. Defense to begin their case on Monday, and we're hearing there's a possibility that Zach Cohen will testify for the defense. Now, he did such a bang-up job in his own trial, which resulted in his conviction for murder. I really would like to see how he helps his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, either way, the mother of the child that's now dead, Sterling. So we'll find out. That's going to unroll next week. So for now, we're getting the time to kind of catch up on some of the foundational witnesses in this case. Remember, the defense is clearly focused on drug abuse, drug dependence, postpartum condition, mental problems that would negate the element of specific intent, so that Cheyenne Harris would be, found guilty of something less than murder, and therefore a lesser sentence might see the light of day before she's no longer with us. So let's go back into the courtroom now and start learning a little about the drug issue. This is Cheyenne Harris in an interview with the authorities.
Don't take offense to this, but any self-medication like with marijuana, methamphetamine, anything like that?
I did.
Okay.
Honestly, I did. Before I met Zach, I was really, really hard into pot.
Okay.
But when I met Zach, he opened my eyes to the fact that it was just making my depression worse.
Okay.
And then I have tried methamphetamine. But
Like how long ago was that?
really not that long ago, within the time that I've had Sterling.
Okay. Okay. Is there any meth at the house?
No.
How did you try it?
Smoked it.
Give me a ballpark of the last time that you would have smoked meth.
It hasn't been in the house.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that for it.
No, I mean, since we moved to...
Okay, so like...
So that's part of the reason we got away from high school, was because we knew too many people.
Okay.
And when we came here, we cut pretty much all ties except for his family.
And that is just a bit of the interview between Cheyenne Harris and the authorities. She's giving you a sense that, you know, she did dabble in some drugs. I don't know if what we've learned from her is enough to make you think that she was dependent, addicted, that her mindset was somehow altered by the drugs, but she tried some meth, you know, maybe it was a few weeks ago. No real history there, no real hardcore drug use, at least in her own estimation in talking to the police. Well, how about if her sort of boyfriend, the guy that she admitted to having sexual relations with, and also admitted to supplying her with meth, how about if he tells us maybe a little bit more about Cheyenne Harris and her issues with drugs? This is Jordan Clark.
Usually it was there, otherwise I did once.
And you said you were at that apartment 2 or 3 times?
Yes.
Did you use meth with Miss Harris, the defendant, at that apartment the 3 times you were there?
No.
How many times did you use meth with her at the apartment?
Once for sure, possibly twice. I can't remember exactly.
Was that the only drug that you observed Miss Harris using at the apartment?
Yes.
And is the only location in that apartment where you smoked the methamphetamine in the bedroom shared by the defendant and Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Where was Nala when you were using the meth?
Usually she was running or playing out in the living room. Or...
Just a few feet away?
Yes.
When you were in that apartment, did you know there was a baby in that apartment?
No.
Did you ever see the door to that back bedroom open where the not the parents' bedroom but the other door?
Not that I can recall.
When you were at that apartment, did Miss Harris ever mention that there was a baby in that apartment?
Not that I recall 100%.
Did you ever see a baby in that apartment?
No.
Did you ever see anybody go in the back room and check on the baby?
I can't say for certain, but not that I can recall. Get food ready for her and essentially take care of her.
Did Nala appear healthy?
Yes.
Did she appear happy?
Yes.
Did she appear to be well nourished?
Yes.
And you said you saw Cheyenne actually prepare food and give it to Nala?
Yes.
Did Nala appear to be well nourished?
Yes.
Was she clean?
Yeah.
Properly clothed?
Yes.
When you said you went to the apartment and you used drugs, you said that there were some drugs already in the apartment that you used, and maybe one time you brought drugs, correct?
Correct.
Do you know how Mr. Cohn and Miss Harris got the methamphetamines that they used?
No.
Do you know how they paid for the drugs that they were using?
No, I do not.
Did you get methamphetamine from Mr. Cohn?
At times, yes.
Did he pay you?
At times, yes.
So Jordan Clark, a little fuzzy on the details, but let me kind of set the scene for you. He's in the bedroom with the defendant, Cheyenne Harris, with whom he's had sexual relations, and also there is the boyfriend, I guess, of Cheyenne Harris, and that's Zach Cohen, the father of Sterling and the father of Nala. And we see him there from his trial, which did not end well for him, a conviction for murder. And then Nala is bopping around in the living room, family room, all by herself while it's one big happy meth-smoking family in the bedroom. So that's the setting there. And oh, by the way, Sterling, totally forgotten, totally ignored, unknown to this witness, Jordan Clark, that he's in a room somewhere or that they even have a baby. Marni Joe, how does this cut? I mean, who's getting helped by this testimony right now?
I actually think the defense, and it because of the intoxication defense. Because obviously when she talked to the police, she minimized her drug use, said they hadn't used it in that house and all of those things. So this actually helped. If you're going to say that you have an intoxication defense, you have to be intoxicated. And Mr. Clark certainly looks like he could have used meth in the past. I believe him that he used it. And I also believe that he can't remember some details because of that. The defense can exploit the fact that he doesn't remember those details, but also use him to show that he smoked meth and that so did their client. You can see, I know you've been putting up some of the mugshots today from this case. I mean, you could see the difference in how this defendant looks now from when she was using drugs, and you could tell that it was there. Methamphetamines, smoking meth is not easy to come out of looking like you've been nurtured, and it certainly makes you look a certain way. And we could see the change and the big difference. So I think that the jury probably will end up believing that she at least was using drugs. We need to find out whether it could have caused an 8 to 12 day lapse in parenting and judgment.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I thought about that too when I first saw her. I was very anxious to see her at the table, having seen nothing but the mugshot for so long. Yeah, she looks healthier. There's just no doubt about it. So does that help engender any sort of sympathy for her that, now she's maybe gotten her life a little straightened out and she was just so out of whack at the time that Sterling died that we're not going to hold her responsible for that, or at least not on the murder level?
I mean, I think it doesn't hurt. I think if I were to think closer about the social science and how I feel about excusing this type of behavior, that's a little different. But we know juries have gut reactions, and they only take into account what the lawyers are prepared to tell them or to present evidence about. And so I absolutely think that it helps her to be sitting there and looking like healthy and like things are better for her, because she couldn't have possibly been this alert and okay at that time if she was using these drugs.
And of course, yet to be determined is whether she will take the stand herself, because that would be can't miss TV. We got to see that. So we'll find that out next week when the defense puts on their case. We're going to take a quick break. We have more witness testimony that lays out the drug use, which is not only core to the defense, but the prosecution has to raise it and negate it, really, to make sure that they can push that murder charge and not let the defendant get off, as it were, with a lesser charge. So we'll come back to that testimony and more on the Law&Crime Network. Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. We're following the case of Iowa versus Cheyenne Harris. The state has rested. The defense will have the weekend to pull things together, and they'll begin their case on Monday. Remember, it is an affirmative defense case, so they've got to come up with an actual case. They don't have to just sit back and say, hey, prosecution didn't prove their case. They do have to do something, and we anticipate an expert to talk about drug dependence, maybe postpartum issues. We may hear from Zach Cohen, the boyfriend, father, already convicted of the murder of Sterling. So it'll be very interesting, and of course we may hear from the defendant, Cheyenne Harris herself. Before we do that, taking a look at some of the foundational information in this part of the prosecution case. Key to the case has been the care or lack of care put forth for Sterling, and the question became, well, when did you last work on the kid? When did you see him? We heard from the entomologist earlier today, 8 to 12 days of bugs setting up camp in this room and in this child's diaper. So when did you last check on him? Let's listen to some witness testimony that suggests maybe even Cheyenne Harris is uncertain when she last checked on Sterling.
When you were in that room and you saw Miss Tony kneeling by the baby, what was she kneeling by that the baby was in?
A swing, a baby swing.
Can you describe where the swing was in the room?
It was up against the wall, facing the wall.
When you were in that room, how did the room feel?
Very warm. There wasn't air.
Was there air moving?
No.
How did the room smell?
Like dirty diapers.
Can you describe how strong the smell was?
Strong.
What do you mean?
Strong as in too strong for the children to be in there.
Was it obvious when you walked in the room, that smell?
Yes.
Did you see the baby?
No.
Why not?
Because she wasn't performing any care, and I didn't feel I needed to have those memories.
So you chose not to look at the child?
Correct.
What happened next?
Tony said I should just console the parents So I turned around and they were standing right outside of the bedroom, and I went up to them and told them I was sorry and what had happened. And she said that the baby was fine last night at 9:30 when I fed him. I said him, and he said, yes, Sterling. I said, do you mean this morning? And she said, I don't know.
Now, I want to go through a little bit again. So you walked out of the apartment, correct?
Out of the bedroom.
Excuse me, out of the bedroom. And where were the parents physically located?
Right outside the bedroom.
Okay. And so you were asked to console the parents, and you attempted to do that, correct?
Yes.
How was Cheyenne Harris, her emotional state when you talked to her?
None. There was no tears. There were no... no emotion.
And how close to the bedroom where Sterling lay in the swing was she at the time?
Not very close. Very close. It's a very small apartment.
Still a distance where you could smell Sterling?
Yes.
Did that reaction seem strange to you?
Yes.
Why?
Overruled, you may answer.
She should have been crying and screaming and upset.
Did you say that she told you the baby was fine? She fed him last night at 9:30?
Correct.
And you said something in response to that?
I said, you mean this morning at 9:30? I said a 4-month-old would have needed to be fed sooner than that.
And what did she respond to that?
Nothing.
When you were talking to the parents, had law enforcement arrived yet?
Yes. Then Reed Palo came in, and he took them in the bedroom, the other bedroom across from where the baby was.
And what did you do at that point?
I left.
Why did you leave?
Because I wasn't feeling too good.
Where did you go after you left?
I went in my car and went out on my route.
Did you stop?
Yes.
Why?
Because I had to throw up.
And why did you throw up?
Because it was so sad. And had I known that child was there all that time, every day I drove by, I could have done something. And that day I was just too late, and I couldn't do anything.
It's important to have a timeline of events when there's been maltreatment of a child, including a death.
And what did she tell you in response to you asking her to describe the events in the time leading up to Sterling's death?
She was not specific in times when she had last fed him or bathed him, is what I recall.
Did she say that she was the last one to see Sterling alive?
I believe that was discussed, and her partner indicated she was the last one to see him alive, and she did not disagree with that.
Was she able to describe how much and how often she had been feeding Sterling in the hours and days prior to his death?
She did offer that information to me, and it was very non-specific in the 24 hours, his last 24 hours of life.
Did you ask her how often Sterling was bathed?
Yes, I did.
And what was her response?
I recall her telling me about every 3 days.
Every 3 days? Is that what you said?
That's what I recall, yes.
Did you ask her to describe how it was that she bathed Sterling?
I recall Cheyenne explaining that she used a bucket to wash him with.
And about every 3 days?
Yes.
These are witnesses in the Cheyenne Harris case testifying as to what they learned about the care, the method of care, the timing of any care received by Sterling. Cheyenne said she'd bathe him every 3 days, I guess whether he needed it or not. Marni, Joe, it seems to me this kind of testimony, considering the defense, cuts both ways.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's very upsetting that she seemed to kind of not know how to care for him, but that can't just be because of intoxication, because as it's coming out of her mouth to DHS professionals, I mean, she raised another child, so she should know that this sounds very strange to that one witness that she only fed the baby at 9:30 the night before. So that is really weird. What's interesting that hasn't come out yet, and I would love to know, is why in the world this DHS investigator, or I'm sorry, Human Services investigator was interviewing them together. I thought it was really powerful the moment when Zach answers the question and she doesn't disagree, right? Who's really in charge here? Who's capable of making decisions and doing what they need to do, and who's kind of running the show? I think that's interesting if they intend to point the finger at him.
Yeah, you would think they would do a little divide and conquer and, see that they can keep their story straight. I mean, that sounds to me to be pretty basic investigation technique. So as we look forward to the defense case, I'm going to bring you on now. I'm hiring you as their third defense counsel. Do you put her on the stand? Come on.
I think she needs to take the stand. I would put her on as long as I thought that she could physically hold it together and tell her story chronologically. I would put her on. Now,
obviously, on direct examination, you're going to lead her where she needs to go within the constraints of a direct exam, but you can't control the cross that well. Aren't you a little worried about that?
You can't, and exactly, that's what I mean. I don't know this woman, right? So I don't know what her demeanor is going to be. I don't know whether she's going to be able to listen to the question and answer what's being asked of her, and that all would go into my decision, not just whether her story has logic to it, but whether she can hold up.
Okay, we'll find out next week. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back for more right here on the Law and Crime Network. And welcome back, folks, to the Law and Crime Network. We're following some of the background of the case against Cheyenne Harris as the state has rested. We'll see the defense case beginning on Monday. Let's listen to some of the Cheyenne Harris interview with the police. And I want you to be very particular in paying attention to the things that she did prior to discovering the death of her son. And ask yourself along the way, well, if you're doing A, B, C, D, and E, how come you didn't just check on the kid? This is the interview with the police and Cheyenne Harris.
We'll just take our time going through this. Sometime last night, before Zach gets home, Nala gets up. And she gets up. Where is she sleeping?
She fell asleep on the couch, the futon in the living room, watching a movie.
So she fell asleep on the living room futon, at some point wakes up, which in turn wakes you up. Where are you?
In the bed. In the bedroom.
Okay. So you're in the bedroom. Do you hear Nala up and around, and that wakes you up?
Oh no, she came in. I always leave the door cracked with the light in the closet on with one of the doors open so that way she can see.
Okay. So Nala comes in and wakes you up. And so you take her in, you bring her into your room and lay her down in your bed then?
Yeah, I let her climb in the bed with me.
Okay. And so she hops in with you, and then you soothe her enough, eventually she goes to sleep.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
It isn't that easy.
What happens then?
Her eyes were closed. She does this thing where her eyes are closed, but she'll still, like, pat around for you, and she does this, like, if she doesn't have a stuffed animal in bed next to her, she takes your arm, wraps it in the blanket, and cuddles that. Well, that wasn't comfortable enough, so she kept flopping around. She couldn't decide if she wanted me to lay on her arm or her to lay on my arm or to lay on the pillow. She didn't know if she wanted to lay on her stomach or across me. So finally, I got back up, I got her a sippy cup, and I tried laying her on the couch in the living room again. That didn't work. So I tried changing the movie. That didn't work. So I tried bringing her back into bed with me. That didn't work. So I tried the playpen. That didn't work. So I just let her go for a minute. She ended up on the couch again. That's where she fell asleep for a short time. Well, no. She ended up on the couch again. And then I knew she wasn't done being up because I could still hear her in there talking. And she ended up back in the bed with me. I was playing a game on my phone. And she watched that and fell asleep. And then that's when I got up and did some dishes because I figured Zach would be home shortly.
Okay.
And then she got back up. I don't even think she was out for a half hour, maybe, before he came back in and she was up.
So Nala, the 2-year-old, falls asleep on the couch. Why isn't she in her own bed or bedroom? Oh, that's right. The other bedroom is occupied by her 4-month-old brother, who is stewing in his own juices and dying. The stuff going on in this house, it's unbelievable. Eventually, Cheyenne Harris does discover that her son is dead. Let's listen to that part of the interview.
And at your house or your place, so I don't know. Where was Sterling?
In the next bedroom in the suite.
Okay. Was the swing turned on?
None of the time, because after a while it shuts off. Normally I have it playing or moving on a slow motion with a little mobile, and it plays music too.
Okay. So Sterling was in the swing, but the swing wasn't moving at that point. Okay. When you found Sterling, did you take him onto the swing, or is he still in the swing?
He was still in the swing.
Okay. And when you get Zach, then what happens after you get Zach?
After some freaking out and having no idea what to do or say, he called the ambulance.
And Cheyenne Harris talking to authorities and explaining to them how she finally discovered that her son Sterling was dead. I think Marni Joe, maybe more important than what we learn after she found Sterling was dead there, because of the arguments of shock and everybody's handles grief differently, is everything that was going on prior to that discovery. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can take, she described having to deal with her daughter and that being a difficult job. The problem is that she's describing parenting in some form that she was doing, even during these days, 8 to 12 days, when Sterling was in that seat, dying. So none of this confession is very helpful for her. It doesn't show that, like, this intoxication defense is coming, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem, is that you have this two parenting tracks. If Nala did not exist, I think the defense would have a much better case, right?
Much easier. I mean, there are, unfortunately, a ton of cases all over the country where, people really don't commit first-degree murder at all. They don't mean to. They have poor parenting skills. They have they're in a bad socioeconomic place. They don't have
Marni,
the coping skills
let me cut you off. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about this. We're going to come back with Aaron Keller has the debrief coming up in just a couple of moments, and we'll be back in just a moment with more on the Law and Crime Network.